South Africa hosted the G20 summit this year. It was a big deal for them. For the first time ever, an African country was playing host. But Donald Trump ruined their moment. He boycotted the summit. He did not attend the event. He did not even send a senior representative. You can imagine how that landed in Pretoria. Not well at all.
Every year, the G20 follows a familiar tradition. The host country ends the summit by raising a small wooden gavel and handing it over to the next host nation. It's symbolic, much like passing a baton. But this year, that ritual was broken, sparking a major diplomatic dispute between the United States and South Africa. The issue began when South Africa hosted the summit, an important milestone, as it was the first time an African nation served as host. However, their moment was overshadowed because Donald Trump chose to boycott the event. He neither attended nor sent a senior representative, a decision that was met with deep frustration in Pretoria. The situation became even more awkward because the next G20 summit is scheduled to take place in the United States, at the Trump National Doral Golf Resort in Miami, a venue owned by Trump's own company. According to protocol, South Africa was supposed to hand the ceremonial gavel to the US delegation. President Ramaphosa struck the gavel to close the summit and announced that it would now pass on to the next G20 president, the United States.
I now say that this gavel of this G20 summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed.
But he did not physically hand it over. He noted that the summit was formally closed and that the group would meet again next year in America. The reason was simple. The American president had not shown up, and the US delegation was represented only by a junior embassy official. South Africa insisted that such an important handover required at least a cabinet-level representative, and they declined to give the gavel to a lower-ranking envoy. This decision angered Donald Trump, who responded in his usual fashion by posting on Truth Social. He declared that the US had not attended the G20 in South Africa because the South African government allegedly refused to address what he described as human rights abuses against Afrikaners. He then announced that, under his direction, South Africa would not receive an invitation to the 2026 G20 summit. Ramaphosa replied by describing the statement as regrettable, choosing not to escalate the dispute further. This leads to the question, does Trump even have the authority to bar South Africa from the G20? The short answer is no. The long answer is that while he cannot revoke a country's membership, since the G20 operates by consensus, he can make participation extremely difficult. As host, the US could deny visas to South African delegates, stall cooperation in working groups, or undermine the function of the summit by refusing to attend meetings. Trump has already weakened the Johannesburg Declaration through his earlier boycott and has used trade and aid as leverage by halting certain US assistance programs. So although he cannot expel South Africa, he can certainly make its experience within the G20 uncomfortable. But what is the real motive behind this dispute? Trump has long accused South Africa of persecuting the Afrikaners, a white ethnic group descended from Dutch, French, and German settlers. Many Afrikaners were historically farmers, known as Boers, the Dutch word for farmers. In 1948, the Afrikaner-led government established apartheid, a system of racial segregation that lasted until 1994, when black South Africans gained the right to vote and Nelson Mandela and the ANC came to power. Today, around 2.5 million Afrikaners live in South Africa, making up roughly 4% of the population. While Trump has previously granted refugee status to a few members of this community, the claims of genocide are not supported by evidence. South Africa does struggle with high levels of violent crime. The country recorded nearly 77,000 murders last year, but only 8 of those deaths involved farmers. and it is not clear whether the victims were white or black. 8 killings certainly do not constitute a genocide. Where does this leave the standoff? Trump appears determined to take a tough stance against South Africa, while Ramaphosa is standing firm. But the larger issue extends beyond these two leaders. If a G20 host can weaponize visas, if members can publicly humiliate each other, and if domestic ideological battles spill into global economic forums, the G20 ceases to function as a stabilizing institution. Instead, it turns into a stage for nationalist theatrics, a dangerous trend for global cooperation. The final riddle reflects on power and hypocrisy. A revolutionary once claimed he would uplift his nation and resist imperialism, only to become what he warned others against. He funded militias across continents, lived in fear, and earned titles such as King of Kings, though history ultimately remembers him as a dictator. Who was he?